Okay, what I've done here, I've sectioned off a little bit of clay, and I'm going to wedge this in what's ordinarily called the ram's horn method. And even this isn't that simple to learn to do. But once you get good at it, what makes it work is that you end up with the shape you want it to be for the next stroke, pick it up and get a hold of it and where you want to push, and push in the direction that you want to push. That's what makes it work. And if you've done this and gotten halfway good at it, it's the same principle with the spiral kneading. It's a matter of getting it into the shape that you want it to be in and putting it into position for the next stroke so that you can push on it where and in the direction you want to push. Alright, the wedging footage that I initially shot while I was reprocessing clay really didn't give that good of a view, so I'm doing it again. This is one of the larger chunks from that batch of clay. This is a few days later. I picked up a head cold. Anyway, what I'm going to do here, I'm going to wedge this just exactly how I would ordinarily wedge clay. First thing to do is to get it started. I'm going to explain as I go along, and because this is throwing consistency clay, you can count on it. I'll be breathing a little hard by the end. Right now, this is the way I will start. This is kind of a variation on your spiral kneading. This is what I do to even out uneven clay. I kind of always start this way. This is what I call, it's like I have a dish and I'm just picking, and I'm very possibly incorporating some air in it as I go through here, which I figure to work out in the ensuing wedging. And I will do this because I'm talking, I can't count strokes. I will do this for 20 strokes. At that point, I'll start changing it a little bit, starting to drive more clay up into this area with the intention of transitioning to what would be a typical spiral kneading. And I'll do that for 20 strokes, gradually getting to the point. You can see the shape is changing. It's not so much more that round dish anymore. I'll do that for 20 strokes. By the time I get to my 40th stroke, it's getting hard to maintain doing what I'm doing. I'll show you the transition. This is the transition right here. Now, at this point, this is pretty much your standard spiral kneading. The one thing I'll point out is that I want you to pay attention to, we have this clay up here, which is like the clay I'm working on. This clay is the clay that's working its way around. As I proceed, more and more clay will end up in this part, less and less out here. Now, I'll do what I'm doing here up to 60 strokes. At that point, I'm obviously not to 60 yet, but I am not counting. At that point, I start coming in lower and stretching it out more, Trying to make nice long strokes. And you see already we have more clay up here, less clay down here. I'll continue with these longer strokes. I'm bringing my weight in more from a lower direction and pushing out that way. You don't have to do this. I'm showing you what I do. You need to learn to get comfortable with the spiral kneading before you start tweaking it. Now from 60 to 80 strokes, I'll keep doing this. At 80, I'll stop stretching it so much. Shorter strokes, coming down more on it, on top of it. You can see at this point, way more clay up here, less clay here. The whole secret to getting this right, I think people think they are supposed to twist or rotate the clay as they push into it. It's not what happens. This is the motion. You need to establish the motion that rotates the clay as you bring it up, and then you're just pushing straight into the clay. Now, you can see how much clay I have up here compared to what's running around the outside. I will continue like this from 80 to 100 strokes. By the time I get to 100, the total that I'm going to go to being 120 strokes. This, by the way, is just over 20 pounds of clay. And you don't need to wedge this much. You need to have a certain amount to be able to do the spiral kneading. But once I get to, but Michael Cardew says 6 pounds. I think you can do it with a little less than that. Work with something that's comfortable for you. Once I get to 100 strokes, I start focusing way more on putting the clay back together. Rather than pushing into it so much, I'm rocking it to seal up the rifts that have developed through the wedging process. You can see right now hardly any distinction between the clay up here and the clay down here. I'm trying to turn it into one cohesive ball of clay. And I'll do this from 100 to 120. And that's what is involved. By the time I get to the end, stop, pound these seams together. Now if you want to think this way about clay. We currently have kind of a channel running through here, the center of the clay. And if you want to, this is what I would ordinarily do, you'll pound it around to try to reshape this so that that channel is running from here to here. And you have a grain in the clay running in this direction. And you want to take that into account when you go to use it. Now I'm going to shape this up to put it back in a bag. As I said, if you can, where did I put the bag this was in? If you can close this up, oops, Don't try to slide it into a bag. Slide the bag over it. If you can close it up with the plastic clinging as tightly as possible to the clay. That's the best way to store it. I figured to use this clay tomorrow, so not a big deal. Don't close it with a twister. Close it as if you were folding the paper around a Christmas present. And that clay is good. We'll hope that that turned out looking better. What I want to try and give you a sense of here is how the forces are being applied. First of all, my wedging table is low enough that I am getting my weight on top of the clay. If you were to take a measure from my kneecap to my belt, my wedging table is maybe about a quarter of the way up from my knee to the belt. What I want you to see here is how one person I know once said, well, you know, in wedging you should have 1 foot directly underneath your clay. You know, that's if you're actually lifting your body back up with the muscles of your lower back, and that's hard on your lower back. Get your feet back. The idea is that with each stroke you're going to start rocking forward, building up momentum, and then you're going to push on the clay, and you're going to push hard enough that that pops you back. And it's just a matter of rocking back and forth like that. This is spiral kneading. This would be where I would be at the end of the kneading. Now, because this is reprocessed clay, and all I'm going to do is bag it up and save it for use. Well, when I go to use it, I'm going to wedge it again. And there's my stack of reprocessed clay. This bag was here from previous reprocessing. This is what came out of the bucket, plus that partial bag of softer fresh clay. So I have a bunch of nice clay to use. I would say too, I've said save collapsed pots for handle clay. If I run out of handle clay, as can happen, because you know pots only collapse so often, I will use reprocessed clay for handles. It just is better clay than fresh clay. The final thing I would say about clay reprocessing, you know, first of all, this is all aimed at people who are trying to learn how to make pots. And if you happen to be taking classes somewhere, you may not have access to the storage space that you need for doing the reprocessing like I'm showing you. All you need is room for a 5-gallon bucket, but if every student wants to have a 5-gallon bucket, that adds up. If I were in a situation like that, I would bring the stuff home and work on it there. The first step is to start saving your throwing slop, because that's what you're going to use for remoisturizing your trimming scraps, bad scrapings, etc. Anyway, I hope this video has been of some help.